Welcome, everybody. Even if it was just for pizza, that's great. We're glad you're here. Gonna give you just a quick introduction, what Midcoast is. Some of this is gonna be kind of old hat for some of you, some of the faces I know here, but yeah, we'll get through this quickly and then we'll get to Tony. So again, I'm Evan, Executive Director here at Midcoast. So a couple word heavy slides, not gonna bore you too much, but essentially mid to late 90s, salmon populations crashed. State of Oregon set up, essentially wrote the plan for salmon and watershed for Oregon. When watersheds for Oregon, that set up watershed councils throughout the state. We're one of changes every year on numbers, but between 60 to 70 different watershed councils spread out throughout Oregon. Our council started with public meetings actually before the Oregon Plan for Salmon Watershed in 1996. We were officially 501(c) nonprofit status in 1999. This also set up what at the time was called the Governor's Watershed Enhancement Board, now called the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. You may hear me say OWEB. That's the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. They are paying for the pizza tonight. They are our main funder. They give us a little bit of money, chunk of money every biennium, kind of keep the lights on, pay our rent kind of money. And then most of our projects, when we do projects at Rolf's Place or Barb and Everett's or over on Bummer Creek, we're applying for grants through the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board to get those projects funded, usually at no cost to the landowners, all state or federal money or other resources that we bring to do these restoration projects. We're a little different than a lot of other watershed councils. Some are just one particular basin. If you think up in the Nehalem, there's an upper Nehalem and a lower Nehalem watershed council. We're a bit different that we have really 4 or 5 major drainages. So starting up north of Lincoln City with the Salmon River, the Siletz River, Yaquina River, Alsea River, and some smaller ones, Yahats River, Beaver Creek, and then all the small tributaries along the coast that drain from the Coast Range out to the ocean. That's our quote unquote turf. As I mentioned, we've overlapped with the Alsea Watershed Council. They were originally part of our group, kind of went off, did their own thing in the early 2000s, but we always kind of, cooperated with them, worked with them in these areas. They were all volunteer based, where we have that kind of, OWEB support every year. So after doing some really good work for almost 20 years, they folded up shop in late 2018, 2019. And like I said, we built this grant to try to start some outreach out in this area. And then 3 years went by and nothing happened. And then back to over here. So also historically worked with the Salmon Drift Creek Watershed Council on the north side. So pretty much Drift, Schooner Creek, and the Salmon River up on the north end. They actually merged back with our group last year. Well, started in 22, finished up in 23. So we're now back under one big umbrella here on the Mid-Coast Watersheds Council. And our office is based in Newport, kind of central there to our almost 1 million acres of area. So I'm not gonna talk I kind of Frankenstein a couple different presentations. Tony's gonna talk a lot about kind of historical perspective and where our streams were, where they are now, where they're going, those type of things. But a couple things just to point out. We know these same rivers and creeks supported, massive salmon runs back in the day. They're capable of doing that. In theory, no man-made barriers, no dams, no culverts for these fish to get through. They can move all over the watershed. We'll never get back to that, pristine condition, but what we're trying to do is set up conditions to restore these wild runs of salmon and other species. And we'll talk a lot about salmon, but we're really a watershed group. We're looking at all kinds of restoration. When we're doing work for salmon, it's been benefiting a lot of species like lamprey, like freshwater mussels, all these different things. So a lot of our funding is very salmon based, very focused on coho recovery as a threatened species. But the work we're doing out there is benefiting not just salmon, a lot of other different stuff and people too. So just to change landscape, that's just the perspective we keep. All these areas used to have cool, clean, oxygen-rich water. Land management practices over the last 200 years, not pointing fingers, just stating facts about where we are now. What we're left with is warmer water, where salmon oftentimes can't live in the summer in a lot of our main stems because the water's too warm. A lot more, sediment introduction, landslides, road runoff, and often oxygen deprived water, where salmon can't really live either. So again, not pointing fingers, just saying this is what we're dealing with. We kind of try to keep that historical perspective, and we also obviously assess current conditions, and we're also forward looking and trying to kind of estimate what's changing with the climate and with weather patterns, and trying to plan for the future and changes in the future as well when we're doing our work. So here, like I mentioned, full watershed restoration, what we really focus is on this term called process-based restoration. Essentially, we can get a grant for 5, maybe 6 years. We do the work we can, and then when we walk away, we're trying to let that property or that creek or whatever we're restoring sustain itself for the long run. So when we plant a tree, that's for repairing a process of that tree growing up, putting shade onto the creek, keeping the creek cooler. 100 years down the road, that creek falls into a stream, maybe into a fishing hole. And that's doing some good for the stream and the structure of the stream. And that's a lot what Tony's gonna be talking about, so I won't steal his thunder there. And I'll just touch on it briefly. We do work everywhere. We work up in the wadable streams, small streams you can walk across. We work in middle tributaries, main stem areas. We do a lot of work down in fresh saltwater marshes. We know all these areas are vitally important for salmon. They're using it on their way in from the ocean. Their juveniles are using it on the way out to the ocean. And we've learned a lot about coho in the last 20, 25 years. They used to be the fish that we thought spawned and reared up in wadable streams, spent 18 months, hightailed it out down through the estuary out to the ocean. We now know they're going everywhere in these basins. They're going down into main stems. They're getting into colder water when that main stem gets too warm. A lot of work that we base our work off was up in the Salmon River estuary, looking at early estuary rearing, those fish that we used to think got washed out with that first fall storm. We called them nomads. We thought they were gone, didn't even count them. Somebody went and found them down in these estuary areas. These estuary areas are rich with food, nutrients, like nurseries for these fish. They get bigger. Bigger's better once they get out to the ocean. And those early rearing coho or Chinook salmon out down in the estuary can actually represent a bigger portion of the returning adults than their wadable stream friends. But really, we're trying to make all these different life history pathways open that have been altered because of land management practices and other issues. So type of work we do, culvert replacements, upgrades, replacing culverts with bridges, replacing culverts with bigger culverts, large wood placement. Tony will talk a lot about that. Vegetation management, kind of longer words just for saying planting trees, planting shrubs, planting flowers, trying to really have a focus on conifers and getting conifers established back along our stream corridors, but also an eye to pollinators and getting pollinator species out there to help the bugs too. We do a lot of work living with beaver. We know they can be a nuisance in some areas, but where we can keep them there, they do our job better than we could ever hope to do it. So if we can set up conditions for beaver where they're not affecting infrastructure, where they're not flooding out roads, where they can do their job and make their ponds, that'll make the coho happy. And so we work with landowners on simple, inexpensive solutions to beaver, and understand they can't be everywhere, but where we can keep them, they're going to do a lot of good on the landscape. Do some bigger projects, stream realignment, floodplain reconnection, and we've been doing a lot of estuary work down in the Alsea estuary, Aquatic estuary, and up in the Sluts and Salmon River estuaries as well. And of course, we try to monitor our work so we know what we're doing, working, and talk a little bit about each of these really briefly before hand it over to Tony. So a couple pictures, not in our area, but these are the kind of culverts we're looking for. An adult salmon can jump up into a perched culvert, like probably not that 6, 7, 8 foot perched culvert, but they can do a little bit of a jump. But for the most part, we're trying to repair these culverts that have disconnected these streams, and it's beyond fish passage. So getting fish up through these culverts, getting juvenile fish back up into these cold water areas is a big thing we do. These culverts and undersized culverts, old culverts that are just old, rusted out, not serving, past their useful life. They're not just affecting fish passage, they're actually affecting the whole morphology of the stream, downstream, upstream. So we work with a lot of timber companies, private landowners to replace culverts like these. go out and get more and more money these days because of what steel and materials cost these days. But put in bridges, put in long-term 50, 75-year solutions at some of these sites to restore fish passage, but also restore those stream processes that are altered because of these type of culverts. This is one of the first mid-coast fish passage projects on the School Fork in the Yachats Basin. The OWEB grant there, 99431, means that was funded back in 1999. Replacing, again, damaged undersized culverts with a nice bridge, make a nice little highway for the fish to get underneath the road there, and restore that wood moving downstream, that sediment, cobble, all those things that are happening at these stream crossings, restoring that process and restoring the stream along with the fish passage work. Just another example here. This is up in the Siletz Basin, so Upper Drift Creek on the Siletz. You can see 11-foot round culvert here. The stream itself was about 32 feet. So we try to shoot for either, we try to get to what's called 1.5 bank full width. So normal width of your stream in the winter, not a flood flow, just a normal high flow. If that's 10 feet, we want a culvert or an opening that's 15 feet to allow fish to get up through there. You know, the Venturi effect, if it's undersized, all that water is going to be rushing through there. It's going to be a velocity barrier for fish to get through. So we try to size these culverts based on the stream we're putting them in. This 11-foot culvert was replaced with a 50-foot wide open bottom culvert. This was out almost at the dead end of a Forest Service road, big project that everyone knew since the 60s when that culvert was put in that it was a problem. But because of its remote location, 14 miles outlog or Forest Service roads, because of cost, over $1 million to do this project, it sat there and sat there and sat there until Midcoast and a bunch of our partners wrote a bunch of grants, 8 different grants to get this project done. And I should have mentioned off the bat, you might hear me say we. That's the big we. Midcoast Watersheds Council, we're 4 staff. We are a small organization, small nonprofit, very active board of 13 people. That we are is BLM, our partners from BLM, Forest Service partners like Steve and Graham, landowners like the ones that are joining us here, state agencies, ODF and W, local groups. That's the we when I say we. It's not us doing this work. It's all of us and all of our partners that are accomplishing this work together. Large woody debris replacement. Not going to talk much about that because Tony will, but I updated this. This is on the left, excavator placement, which is our most common way we put wood in streams. BLM, Tony might mention, it has a big helicopter project coming up that are going to fly whole trees into portions of Lobster Creek and 5 Rivers, I think, on the Forest Service side. High lines are sometimes done during logging operations, not done as much as it used to be, but some timber companies still, when they have their high line set up, will take trees and put them down in the creek with that. I updated this. This is actually up on Mill Creek, just above Janet's place up there. For a project that we worked with Tony and Graham to put wood in there 2 summers ago. And then if we can get all the permits in hand by this summer, we'll be doing that work on Janet's place and the other properties on Mill, Beatty Creek this summer. Vegetation management. I think Graham and Steve might actually be in this picture from Upper Yaquina way back when. Reed canary grass fields, most of you know it. Non-native grass that really takes over, doesn't let anything else grow. A lot of times we're working in those areas to try to get natives growing in those areas. Blackberry, constant problem everywhere now. People have given up trying to control it. Chokes out, doesn't let anything else grow. We work to try to get rid of that and get these trees and shrubs established. Like I said, conifer establishment. We want conifers along our riparian areas. When those fall in the creek, they last a long time. Tony will talk about that. And we're really thinking here 500 or 50, 300-year timescales of these trees growing up, falling in the creek and restoring that process. A big part of this now is the carbon storage picture. We know this idea of co-benefits that, 30% of the carbon that we need to store out of the atmosphere to keep our kind of warming in check can be done with planting in riparian areas. It's all these different things that when we plant a tree, it's doing a lot of different things for us. So this is the before picture of them scouting the field. This is the after picture of us after planting, working on the property for 4 or 5 years after that. Instant shade up here, we like it because we can use cottonwood. about 6 feet a year, great tree in the restoration world, not as appropriate out on the coast. But up here we use that species, but this is a good result from one of our planting projects, going from a reed canary grass field to a nice mixed canopy of native species. Living with beaver, talked about that. Putting their food out there. They like to chew on willow, pine maple, giving them their dam building material. Like I said, if you set up the conditions for them, if you build it, they will come. They'll come find it. Some people know that better than others. But they can cause problems around culverts like this. They can plug culverts. They can be a nuisance. They can cause flooding. There's some simple solutions that we like to talk about with landowners that we can go get funding for to stop them from doing the problem things and try to get the benefits of the good things that they do out there. Stream repair, floodplain reconnection, estuary work, that's all kind of lumped into one, but a lot of that life history diversity picture has been changed by dikes and tide gates and other infrastructure down in our estuary areas. Getting that water reconnected to its floodplain up here, up in the Alsea Basin, down there, down in the estuary is vitally important. We know that for coho. Little fish, not great swimmers. They need to get into those floodplain areas during those floods and hang out. They can't hang out in that ripping, roaring chocolate milk of the Alsea River. So we need to give them that access, give them that ability to get into slow moving water and hang out until they can get back in the stream when the water comes back down and clears out a little bit. So just a one before and after. This is on Big Creek, Washburn State Park down in Lane County on the coast. All of our turf goes all the way down there. This is it's hard to tell, but the floodplain here is about 12 feet up above that creek. It's an old ODOT landing. We helped facilitate a land swap between ODOT and state parks for state parks to take over that property. And then Graham and his crew did a bunch of work to bring that floodplain down, bring that creek up, restore that floodplain connection. And really, if you got the letter in the mail, really just mess up that creek, make it real nice and messy. Messy Creek is a salmon happy creek. That all those hiding spots for the juvenile fish, making deep holes with that wood that the big fish can hang out in and rest on their way up the river. Some folks don't, it's counterintuitive to some of our thinking of a really messy stream, and we want our instincts to clean it up and get the wood out and do those kind of things. But you talk to any fisherman, where do you catch the big fish? It's underneath these big logs where they're hanging out. So Tony will talk a lot about this. I'm setting you up to talk about a lot, Tony. You better come through. And then just lastly, like I said, we try to monitor our work. So we have goals for our projects, either survival of percentage of trees or native cover, or number of pools created from the wood we put into the creek. We try to monitor that, make sure we're doing, what we said we're doing. That's to our funding agency to make sure we can get the next grant. But also just, how we're doing and how we can improve and how we learn from each project, lessons learned, and make the next project even better. So a lot of partnerships with the Lincoln Soil Water Conservation District out here, Benton Soil Water Conservation District, a lot of different partners from OSU that we work with to monitor our work. And we're just wrapping up a big 10-year study up in the Silettes, one of the 15 mill creeks in our million acre area up on the Silettes. We're looking at the geomorphology, macroinvertebrate, and how coho numbers change with this almost 7.5 miles of wood placement in one season. And we're just wrapping that up with OSU this year. So really quickly, I wanted to make some maps today. My internet down in Waldport was not cooperating, so get words for now. Not an exhaustive list. We're gonna have a series of these meetings. We're hoping you'll see some nice pretty maps next time when I get some better internet service. But we've done a lot of work. Again, we have what are called limiting factors analysis, which is a lot of work that Graham and actually Steve did back in the day, kind of looking at a stream reach, really finding the anchor habitats are really important areas for the fish and focusing on our work so we get the most bang for our buck. We've done those for quite a few streams in our area, Bummer Creek and Upper Five Rivers in particular in this area. And then we write that plan and just, kind of have our roadmap for restoration and then try to start checking those projects off the list. And we've done quite a few of those in Bummer Creek. More work to be done in Bummer Creek, I hear you. and have done 2 phases of work up in Upper Five Rivers, wood placement, planting, culvert replacements, that type of work. Ernest Creek, Rolf and Wiper here to tell us all about that one. Little Lobster Creek, worked with Barb and Everett, a couple other landowners with Forest Service and BLM on that project as well. And then, like I mentioned, lots of partners doing work out there too. Alsea Watershed Council has done a couple series of large wood placements in Toad Creek. I think they helped in South Fork maybe with the BLM. BLM's done some South Fork, not an exhaustive list, plenty more work out there that's been done. Forest Service has done a lot of work Upper Five Rivers in some of those areas. ODFW did a project a couple summers ago on Sealy Creek. They assisted with Starker last summer, maybe 2 summers ago on Honey Grove Creek. And our timber partners as well, Starker, Weyerhaeuser's been upgrading a lot of their culverts on their ownership. Starker does a lot of wood placement when they have a timber harvest near a creek. They try to throw some logs in the creek as they're working. So a lot of good work being done out there. And we're just one piece of the puzzle. So upcoming projects, some of the might be interested in that. We're working with BLM to design up to 15 culverts, mostly up the hill here in the upper Alsea, towards Mary's Peak. Working on those designs, getting engineers to get engineered designs that we can get permits for, and then get a bunch of culverts replaced on BLM. Mill Beatty Phase 2, right up here on Mill Creek, working with BLM, ODFW, Weyerhaeuser, Forest Service, private landowners, to do a big floodplain reconnection wood placement project and planting this summer to get more floodplain reconnection up there. Honey Grove Oxbow right in the backyard right here, working with the landowners on the other side of the river. We're just in the design phase for that, of looking to get more water back into that historic Oxbow channel. And then actually working with ODOT, and this is setting up probably future meetings that I'll see some of you at. Working with ODOT to get essentially a flood relief valve underneath Alsea Deadwood Highway. So when the water all comes up on this side, it's not all channeled through the North Fork Bridge there. And it has a little pressure relief valve that can get some water out and across and not flood what we're looking at right out the window here. So stay tuned for that. More to come on that one. It's a big project that we're in about halfway through the design of, and we're going to be starting some public meetings here, hopefully fallish, somewhere around there for that. So. And then those who got letters, we did some mapping, found some priority areas of large wood where we want to put some more wood. Lobster Creek, heard some folks from there. Crooked Creek, Upper Five Rivers, Fall Creek, Bummer Swamp Creek, others. We have priorities. Sometimes we have opportunities that are not our highest priority, but hey, we can have some impact. So I'll say it. I can't believe it's the first time I said it, but more wood is more good in our view. So anywhere we can get wood and put wood in creeks and where it's not going to, affect landowners negatively, and we'll have help salmon habitat. That's the work we're doing. So, all right, I've said enough. Thank you. My contact's up there. We also work a lot with volunteers. We operate a native plant nursery down on Beaver Creek. Full disclosure, I'm a plant guy and a fish guy job. I love plants first and foremost. I like fish, they're fine. But I love growing plants. That's most of my background. So if you ever find your way out towards the coast, looking to volunteer, every other Friday, we do volunteer events. We also bring folks out in the field. We had a volunteer planting event over here at Bummer Creek a couple weeks ago. So if you email info@midcoastwc.org, get you on our mailing list for volunteer list. You donate, you can volunteer, you can participate on your land. You can attend these meetings that we're hoping to hold here quarterly, at least for the next couple of years. And then we have monthly community meetings down in Newport as well. So that's longer than I wanted to talk, and I'm sorry. I'll get to Tony now. So thank you.
Thank you.
And eat more pizza, because otherwise I'm gonna eat it all.
No, I wish I get some other things. Yes, all right. Did you want anything?
Nice. Thank you. Yeah. Now for the real show. I'm sorry.
Better expectations.
That's what I learned about down Vegas.
Do I just put that?
Having to click it first, but I think you're okay. Sorry. Yeah, that there.
Anybody need to stand up and stretch a second?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I can't. It's
Oh, yeah. Sorry, when I closed down. Sorry, it's not sharing.
Yeah.
Right.
Should I start?
All right, you ready?
Hi, everybody. My name is Tony Spitzack. I'm a fish biologist with the BLM Mary's Peak Field Office. And my talk will be on reconnecting floodplains through aquatic restoration. Now, when I start looking at a project that we might do a restoration on, there's two things I really look for. Number one, what kind of processes created the ecosystem that we're trying to restore and are affecting the ecosystem that we're trying to restore. And also number two is, what are we trying to get to? So the first thing to look at, right click, left click.
Zoom, let's screw it up. We might just have to click. Just click that arrow. Maybe.
Yep. Okay. Is the historic hydrology of the area. And when I say the area, I mean like Western Oregon, including Willamette Valley and Coast Range. Travel over land was probably pretty difficult a couple hundred years ago. There's no culverts, there's no bridges. Can you imagine traveling from here to Portland in the winter, trying to cross all those creeks? That'd be pretty difficult. But we don't have photos, but we do have accounts that were written down. So for instance, there's a report from the Secretary of War from 1875. The Willamette River flowed in 5 separate channels between Corvallis and Eugene across the flood.
Yeah.
And you can see evidence of that with the LiDAR. This is one of those famous photos where they accentuated the LiDAR and all the different channels that were in there. So that's evidence that, yeah, it was all over the place. And it moves. In classic British humor, the British explorers said Tualatin Valley was mostly water connected by swamps at the time. And this checks out most of the trails in that area, in the whole area. Anytime people were trying to go someplace, they tended to stay right above the floodplain up on the foothills, on the mountains, where they tried to travel. So a lot of the floodplains probably looked a lot like this. We have multi-thread channel, very connected to its floodplain. And that's important because this sinuosity and how it's separated into a bunch of different channels, that's a fraction of the water running through each channel and a fraction of the velocity. And that's important. We'll come back to that. The other thing that you can glean from the historic documents is that there was lots of wood. In 1826, explorer trappers were trying to get up the Siuslaw, and they were unable to explore most of the Siuslaw River system due to log jams there. A partial list of rivers that were completely blocked by drift jams in the mid 1800s: Tualatin, Yamhill, Lucky, Long Tom, Willamette, Wilson, Trask. These are Willamette rivers and coast rivers. And these drift jams weren't small, anywhere from 100 meters long to 1,500 meters long. You're talking about 1.5 kilometer long drift jams. There's from the same report by the Secretary of War in 1875, they pulled out 5,500 trees from a 50-mile stretch upstream of the Willamette River over a 10-year period. And these trees were 5 to 9 foot diameter, 90 to 120 feet long. So they're not counting the 2 to 4 foot diameter trees. They had plenty of those. So where did all this wood come from? Well, a lot of it probably came from how you'd expect a single tree falling in that's growing next to the creek. But besides that, a lot of them came from debris flows. We get a lot of our wood and sediment from debris flows around here. We have steep drainages, and a lot of these drainages are prone to landslides. And this is a natural part of the ecosystem, how the ecosystem evolved. In fact, they find that coho are more likely to be in areas where debris flows are common. So this was a debris flow that we had on the Siletz this year. I don't know if you heard about it. It's near Valley of the Giants. It came down. If you look right here, you can see the scour, and that doesn't do it justice. That scour line is like 25 feet high. Came about a mile downstream. This is me. I don't know if you can tell. This is me right here in front of the culvert.
What are they gonna have?
Just to give you a kind of scale of what this debris flow that came down. But the other thing I want you to look at, so when it ran out into the flatter area, you have a pinch point with lots of wood here. Wood is buried all over this place. There's gravel everywhere. And I don't know if you can tell, but there's actually a little side channel developing right there. This is actually great fish habitat. This is another debris flow that happened in the Siuslaw this year, about 2 months ago. You can see that it scoured out the steep part and then came down on the flat part and kind of spread out. Lots of wood, lots of gravel. And of course, the fish here weren't happy about it. But the fish downstream and around, I mean, that's providing a lot of good fish habitat. After you get that first slug of sediment, the creek washes it out and you're left with some pretty good habitat. So what exactly does the wood do when it's in there? Well, it slows velocities. So the thing with rivers is when they're moving, and they're not just moving water, they're moving gravel, they're moving cobbles, there might even be moving boulders if they have enough power. So when you put wood in, it slows that water down, and when that water slows, there's less power. And when there's less power, it starts dropping out all that gravel and sediment. It also provides resting cover in eddies. So if you guys are ever by a river and you see a whole lot of wood, a wood jam, just watch how the water moves. It's moving in all sorts of directions. Sometimes it's even going back upriver. So that place, that's important because that allows fish to kind of rest in those eddies, not always have to be swimming against the current. It redirects flows. It redirects flows on the floodplains into side channels. It'll redirect flows down and do scour pools. And all these are very important for fish habitat. Those floodplains and side channels, that's really important for little juvenile fish to get out of the main channel when you get a high flow. So that they don't have to constantly swim up or try to avoid being washed down. The wood provides hiding cover for fish. food for macroinvertebrates. And it also provides crossings for wildlife. I set up a game camera at one of our structures. And I was just doing it to watch the floods. But I caught cougar, bear, bobcat, all using our structure to cross. And then I walked up the stream trying to find a place at high water to cross. And I couldn't find a place. Like, you could go a mile without really finding a good log to walk across. So it makes sense. So since probably the early 1800s, people have been disconnecting floodplains in the area. And there's a bunch of different ways that we've been doing that. Either removing beavers through trapping, navigation. So when we first got here, like I said, it's hard to travel overland. So rivers are a good way to travel. But if you're gonna travel in a river, you gotta get rid of the wood that's in your way so that you can kayak past. Log drives and splash dams, removing riparian trees. And then we actively channelize streams with levees, roads that are adjacent to streams, and straightening streams and draining floodplains in farmlands. So let me dig a little bit more into it, just to kind of explain it a little more. When you remove beaver, so here's a beaver dam. And what that does is it slows down the water. And like I said, when you slow down the water, you slow down the power, you get a lot of sediment settling out. And so what's gonna happen is the level of the stream bed here is gonna be higher than the level of the stream bed in front of the dam. You remove that beaver, nothing's maintaining that dam, it blows out. And now you have water coming over a step drop. And that's gonna end up eroding away all the way back up the stream. It's called unzipping the stream. And that drops that stream down. So that it looks more, I don't know if you guys can see it, but that's an incised stream through a meadow. And that could be what happened at that meadow. Also log drives. So this is a picture from around the turn of the century, 1904, in Eagle Creek. I mean, they stuffed the wood in there, and when you get that much wood going down the creek, it'll scour away your bed and your banks. And then when you're moving that down, all that wood will probably get racked up on a natural log jam or boulders. And so you need to remove those with dynamite or any way you can to get the wood downstream. We also did splash dams. So in between 1880 to about 1920, but there was one that went all the way to 1957. We did splash dams where you build a giant dam. And this is usually in the smaller streams that wouldn't naturally carry logs for log drives. You pool water behind it, drop wood in, and then you either blow the dam or open the gate, and all that water and logs charge down the creek, scouring out the bed. The Tioga Dam was the biggest, and it was decommissioned in 1957, but there was 230 of these splash dams documented across Western Oregon. So you can kind of see we're moving our way up the stream, gradually removing wood as we go. First the navigation and the beavers, then the log drives, then the splash dams. And then in the 50s to the 70s, we started seeing some of the timber harvest practices we were doing where we would throw the slash into the creek. And people were looking at that and saying, oh, that doesn't look good. That could actually cause fish passage issues. Excuse me. So people started doing stream cleaning, that's what we call it. So removing all the wood from the stream. But the thing was, we didn't just remove the slash. We removed all the wood, even the natural wood. This is actually Mill Creek on Janet's property, just upstream on BLM. BLM did a stream cleaning in conjunction with the timber sale. And a professor from OSU, Bichetta, did a paper where he did cross sections of that stream before and the year after the stream cleaning. And the bed dropped 2 to 6 feet in 1 year from removing that wood. So. This is another picture. This is Lobster Creek, stream cleaning in Lobster Creek. I don't know if you guys know, it's right by J-Line, where J-Line comes in. If you know that creek, it's by the bridge to nowhere.
We're by,
Misty Acres.
Maybe.
Misty Acres, like mile marker 9.
Oh, this is on BLM upstream a ways.
Oh, okay, so yeah.
Up past.
Yeah, just past East Fork, yeah. This was actually a long stringer bridge. You can see it here too. So, before and after picture right there. These are cool photos that I found in my files. Like, wow. But you can kind of see right here, it's already starting to incise a little bit without that wood to slow it down. This is another picture of Lobster Creek. Then these are the kind of wood jams that were in there. They look a little like debris flow jams. And the reason I'm bringing that comparison together is that when we look at this and you start thinking, is that a fish passage issue? Yeah, it kind of looks like a fish passage issue when you're looking at it like that. But we tend to look at things statically, but it doesn't stay that way. We get higher flows, wood flows. There's usually a way, if the water gets around, fish can usually get around. I've done a lot of spawning surveys. And every year I come to some barrier that I'm like, oh, they're not past this. There's no way they're up past this. And every year there's 15 coho upstream. At this point, I've realized I need to start visualizing what this looks like at high flows, because that'll tell you where the side channels are, that they're making it up and around this barrier that you're seeing in the stream. So some other things we've done is levees and roads. When you put a levee in, typically what you're doing is you have the stream originally has this whole floodplain, but you put a levee in, so you've restricted it. And now it can't spread out. And when it can't spread out, you've concentrated all that water power into a smaller area. Now that's gonna scour away when it gets high flows. And you're gonna end up with an incised channelized stream. When we put roads adjacent to streams, we're kind of doing the same thing because we like our roads right down in the floodplain where it's flat. That makes it easy. The other thing about roads, they tend to cut off supplies of wood and gravel. I mentioned earlier, streams don't just transport water, they transport gravel, sediment. And when we put culverts in, we're only worried about the water usually. So we're kind of starving our downstream systems of wood and gravel with the culverts. So results of these activities is a lot of incised, and when I say incised, it's just scoured down, so you have steep banks, single channels with bedrock or boulder stream bottoms, disconnected from the floodplain, and riparian areas dominated by hardwoods or no trees in it. So what? Maybe we want it that way. So let's do a comparison just to see. For an incised channel, it's very efficient at moving water downstream. The problem with that is that it doesn't give that water a chance to percolate into the floodplain. And so you'll end up with less groundwater recharge. In addition, the water table is probably going to be right around wherever the stream is. And so if your stream is way down here, that's where your water table is going to be. It's going to dry out your floodplain. You're going to get a different set of vegetation on that floodplain. That'll typically be lower biological productivity. Your plants aren't going to grow as fast because they don't have their feet wet. And it's confined confined into that one narrow channel, so it's more erosive. Not only does it flush sediment down, but it's probably gonna flush some nutrients down too. And that, in comparison, an activated floodplain, you're gonna have a lot slower movement of water downstream. It's gonna percolate in. Groundwater recharge, higher water table, lower power, so less erosive, and higher biological productivity. You're gonna have a lot more area too. So if this has little streams all over the place, that's a lot more area of water for your fish to live than one little channel. There's other benefits to this. So this picture's from a study that was done where they kept some Chinook smolts. They raised them either in channel or on the floodplain. You guys guess which ones were on the floodplain? These are the same age smolts, same age. So these were raised on the floodplain. There is more food there, but more importantly, I think, they didn't have to constantly swim against the flow. And so they had more energy to grow. And this is not just benefits to fish to activate your floodplains. There's downstream flood mitigation. So when you have channelized streams, water flows down fast when you have a rain event. If you have a whole watershed of incised streams, all the water is flowing down fast at the same time. And you get a big rush of water, same time, it's synchronized, and you get this higher peak flow. When you have activated floodplains across your watershed, that's gonna come down at different times. And so what it does, you get the same amount of water, but it stretches it out and your peak flow is lower. Does that make sense? There's other benefits, drought mitigation. So floodplains are really natural reservoirs. If you have your stream up high and not incised, it's gonna recharge that floodplain with water. And then during the summer, during the dry period, it's gonna release that water back into the stream more slowly. And related to that, they're starting to find evidence that it mitigates some fire risk too. Now, it's not a foolproof, definitely, but every little bit helps. So these are, and I don't know if you guys can see this very well, but these are pictures of a restoration project in McKenzie River area. This was pre-fire, immediately post-fire, short-term recovery. Basically, what they found was it stayed greener in the restoration area where they reconnected the floodplain, and that makes sense. All the trees that have their feet wet all the time, they're going to not be as water stressed during the summer. And I fought fire for a while. If you have trees that are not as water stressed, they're just not gonna torch like the other trees that are water stressed. So this brings me, that's kind of the process part of when I look at a restoration project. Now, how to decide where we want to go from where it is now, or if we want to go somewhere. So this is a stream evolution model. Kluwer and Thorne came out with it in 2013. It's a conceptual model. It helps figure out where the stream goes. Streams go through cycles, just like everything else. Say there's an elk wallow, right? The elk's wallow in there, they create a nick point. You get a head cut that moves its way upstream. You'll get an incised stream, just like if you drove logs down. It's still an incised stream. But what happens is the stream ends up healing itself. It's always trying to heal itself. It's physics. It's gonna try to go back to the meander. It's gonna erode on one side, erode on the other. When you get an incised stream, you've concentrated the stream power. It's gonna scour out on the bottom until the sides are too tall to be stable. Then it starts slumping in. As it slumps in, that gets taken downstream, you widen the stream. When you widen the stream, there's less power. As there's less and less power, it starts grading back up. And so it becomes a cycle. Most streams in Western Oregon are probably in the stage 2, where you have no trees, or stage 3, 3S, where you have trees. But the thing is, we harvested a lot of the trees in the riparian, and what came back was alder. Historically, we had cedar, probably a lot of cedar, Doug fir, hemlock down there. And those conifers last a lot longer when they fall into the stream. A hardwood will last about 4 years before it rots and gets pushed downstream. Conifer, a cedar will last 50 years, maybe 100 if it gets buried. So if you decide where you're gonna wanna go and you wanna do stream restoration, there's multiple methods. Evan mentioned a few of them: large woody debris placement, beaver dam analogs. There's bank stabilization techniques. If you're moving field, you can stabilize that bank to stop the erosion. Rock weirs, riparian planting, and process-based, or what they call stage 0 restoration. This picture is actually of the Mill Creek, just upstream of your place, Jenna. On BLM. So the key here is responsibly implementing aquatic restoration, and that means permits, and this is my permit season, so I probably am a little grumpier than I usually am. I gotta get permits from Army Corps, Department of State Lands, Endangered Species Act, County Floodplain Land Use, actually, Evan does that. DLCD, Oregon DEQ, and because we're a federal agency, we need to do NEPA as well. Luckily, we have some programmatic permits that make it much easier to do, streamlined, but it's still fun. All these permits have best management practices that we have to adhere to. And number 1 is protect infrastructure. We don't live in 1810 anymore. We have to make sure that the things we use, the roads, the bridges, the houses, everything that we use stays in place. So our number 1 goal is to protect infrastructure. And there's a few best management practices we use. In-water work window. So ODFW usually puts out for every stream a in-water work window where it's low water in the summer. Although the coast has some other times, but we also work from the bank when possible. We do turbidity monitoring. This is actually my little turbidity meter, so I keep track of that every couple hours. And then if we use ground-based equipment, we do mulch, seed, plant those access trails. One of the other BMP, best management practices, is meant to keep the stability of the log jams. So you need to use 2 times bank full width. And Evan mentioned bank full width is like flood level every 1.5 to 2 years, so pretty common. So you need 2 times that length. We also tend to weave trees into buttress trees or live trees on the bank, and that pinches them in. So when the waters come up, they don't go anywhere. We also put ballast logs up above the flood level so that it weighs down on the trees that are in the creek. A very key point is that wherever you end up putting your large wood structures, you want someplace for that water to go. You're displacing water. So you want a floodplain nearby or something like that to push water up onto. So this is actually my last slide, but this was the game camera that I had set up. And I was just looking to capture photos of the flood, and you can kind of see it right there. The river is coming in right here. And when you first look at this is crazy. You're like, oh my goodness. I hope your logs stay in place. But if you look closely, and I don't know if you can, but if you look closely and match up the logs, the water on the floodplain is only like 6 inches deep, maybe 2 feet in the channels. It's not huge. That's a perfect illustration of how it spreads it across the floodplain, and you don't have as much power in that water. Not as much erosion. All these stayed in place, but. So I want to thank our partners. Mid-Coast Watershed Council is the highest functioning watershed council that we work with. They're very good to work with. And
Not getting paid, by the way.
that would be a conflict of interest. And that's it. Thank you. I'll take questions if anybody has that.
You were, I didn't hear you mention soil conservation service. You were hand in hand with them too?
I do. I work with different ones, usually like Polk Soil and Water. I've worked with them a lot. I haven't had the opportunity to work with Benton yet or Lincoln County one yet, but we're definitely open to any partners that want to work with us.
Yeah, well, I know, my husband passed away now, but, it was always his intent or whatever to, you can look right out the window, see a problem out there, to get the school and our place and the neighbors across the way, kind of on the same wavelength. And because there's a terrible, amount of soil being lost out here that's going right down the river, and it just our bank just
Keeps
collapses.
moving and collapsing.
Yeah,
And I think, yeah, that's probably, might be those levees that are there, but
I think
I'll
even
allow it.
before the levee, but yeah, it hits the levee and then it splashes back over and then washes out my land. And we're actually, the neighbor who has fields on the other, well, we have fields on both sides, but he has the field up on the south. And, he's afraid he's not gonna be able to get to the back of his place with equipment and stuff because the river is taking too much of his land.
right.
And so,
And I think Evans, the Oxbow Honey Grove.
Yep.
Okay, Honey Grove Oxbow project that he's gonna be leading up with Mid-Coast might hopefully solve that. Some of it. Yeah,
Can I tell you a really interesting, at least to me, thing
Yeah.
about Bummer Creek? I live a couple miles south of town and off the Alsea Deadwood Highway. And Bummer Creek is right along the edge of our property. And I've cut a walking trail right by the edge of Bummer Creek. So it's horribly incised, as you guys were mentioning a minute ago. It's a straight, it's like the wall here. It's a straight shot from the valley fill down to the water.
Yeah.
And it's 10 to 12 feet high. Well, I was walking past from time to time, and down in the creek were several big logs, this big in diameter. And I wondered what was going on, and eventually I got a ladder and I got down in the creek with a shovel, and I proved to myself that these logs were going under the valley fill. There was 10 feet of valley fill over the top of these logs. And the texture of this wood was not quite like styrofoam, but it wasn't like wood anymore. So, wow, that was wonderful, because I'm kind of a paleo sort of guy, and I was thinking, well, these date back probably to the Pleistocene. And I was trying to figure out how to get a date on these logs and looked up, and jeepers, it's $500 to get a carbon 14 test done. So I was looking at other things and happened to mention this to my son, and he said, well, all these darn volcanoes in the Coast Range have spewed out ash over the years. And wow, of course, each volcano had its own mineral composition and can be identified by looking at the mineral composition. And so I got down in the creek and instantly found this ash layer over all the wood that was in the creek. And when I was down there, there was a lot of other wood and preserved plant material that was under this ash. So wow, I really am pretty excited. And I looked online to try to figure out what's the most likely volcano and it was Mount Mazama, ash. And Mazama is thought to have been a 12,000 foot volcano that eventually blew up, and the net result is Crater Lake today. So the neat thing also about Mazama ash is that it's been dated about 7,700 years ago. Well, I have a friend who teaches geology at the University of Oregon, geology and volcanology. So he's well up on stuff, but he came right over, and I've got a microscope, and we started looking, and he immediately confirmed that it was Mazama ash. And so that was really pretty cool. So, but that, to me, it makes 7 or 10 feet of valley fill just in that amount of time. So I got looking, and some of this plant material, there were cones coming out, and they are Sitka spruce cones, no doubt about it. So 7,000 years ago, we had Sitka spruce in the area. Pretty amazing.
Did you plant them?
Found cherries and a few other things. I haven't identified yet the big logs, but they probably were Sitka spruce too. Anyway, it's been really fascinating to me to know Sitka spruce 7,000 years ago.
He's the next property after that.
Oh, okay.
The pond and that.
Yep.
He's the property there.
Nice. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, we'll say you haven't made it, I live on a class A farm. So you haven't made your train wreck on your property, not caused by the landlord, somebody else.
The major what, sorry?
Major train wreck.
Okay.
Right here.
Where the hell the state lady come from, I don't know. I don't even want to know. I'm so pissed off with her. Don't ever want to see her again. I don't know if she was coming up the damn creek down fish. I don't know. She found this train. I got a call in the middle of the day from my wife that this lady from the state's here, and you know what's happened on the other end of our property, and I says, no, I really don't care. I was running the crew up on the 1,000 line, I got my issues going on, tell her hers are gonna wait. Well, she didn't agree with that thinking. So the best thing I could tell her is you're gonna have to come out on a Saturday and Sunday and talk to me. Well, I don't do that. And I says, well, then I guess you don't want to talk to me. Because I work 5 and 6 days a week. That's your problem, not mine. Well, we finally met up. To make a real long story short, I built over 200 yards of road. I put in a $7,000 culvert. I paid for all the excavator rental out of my pocket. I'm a little over $20,000, my own money out on this. My wife called everybody in the world, including Steve, is somebody gonna help with this project? Everybody ran.
So there was a culvert there that you had to replace, or what was the problem? No.
There was a side creek that got loaded with dirt, brush, old fencing, and she wanted it cleaned now. And I says, I gotta get across that to get to the big problem. Well, you can't take a machine across there. I says, well, the son of a bitch ain't gonna fly across. I mean, let's deal with some reality here, you know? And, so I ended up telling her to get off my property and stay the hell off and never come back. I says, I'm not telling you you're not right, but I tell you to get involved in help. And the first word out of your mouth of, well, we don't have any money, but I can tell you how to do it. I said, lady, I deal in the construction business out in Hills. I have a real good idea what all the problems are and what I need to do to remedy this. And if it's my pocketbook that's fixing this, it'll be on my time schedule, and some of it's gonna be my way. Steve came out and done some work on our place, shit, I don't know, years ago. You know, no big deal there. My wife's going, we got some more problems, and why don't you go to the meeting tonight and see where they're at? On one hand, I'd like to have you guys come out to take a look, and then we're gonna have to have a long talk about something, because at this point, I'm not as willing to do it as she is. I mean, so I don't know.
Sure. And
I got a piece of property that I'm willing to let things happen on, but
You don't have, you don't need to do them, use your money, your money for it.
that's right. I mean,
And I mean, we can't make promises. We know we're not gonna fix every problem out there, but I mean, I'd love to come take a look. You
You
know,
ever-
offer what we can and see if it's a project that we could take on or, you know, line up other resources for technical assistance or other funding opportunities, but.
for the last couple of 3 years, I've been working a lot less time. So
So here's a
I've been
picture
doing
of
some
that.
of my
Just
own
leave that
research
right
on
there.
what's going on in these streams and main rivers, and I came to some conclusions of
If you can.
why, my dad died when I was young. I grew up around a bunch of guys like
Next to it.
Paul Broom and Al
Those
Ludlow,
big
we ran the
as
hatchery up there, Andy Manforth.
I guess it is. And this water's not that shallow. It's not
All
that
the hours,
deep
there's
there.
no
Yeah,
extra.
that's why I was
So
thinking it should go, but no.
I got to
Get
do
deeper
some
now.
of my own studies. I think one
That
of
was
the
good.
things that's really hurting around here is we have low this river up out here in the Floodplains. Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you. And for the last 3 years, I've played down in the river when I was a kid. Hell, you couldn't step on the bottom without stepping on one. I haven't found one for 3 years in the main river. And I think it would be a good food source for the fish. I just think not only fixing the stream, I think what you guys are doing is, hate to say it, but a small portion of the problem in reality.
But what happened to the men? Why are they gone?
Well, that's what I've been wondering. I'm not sure.
It's a combination of a lot of things. It's never one thing. It's always, you know, list of things that are damaging. And lamprey historically have been very, very understudied. They're just starting to figure out what lamprey need. A lot of times, kind of the expectation was if we're doing work for salmon, that's gonna benefit lamprey. And one realization fairly recently on the, you know, long enough time scale is lamprey, you know, they can climb up, they can latch on to Willamette Falls and climb up a waterfall, but they can't latch on to metal. So they can't climb up through a metal culvert. Lamprey can't jump at all. Again, they can suction on and climb up a waterfall, but any perch on a culvert where an adult salmon maybe could jump up into it, a lamprey can. So like these, you know, sometimes we're fixing to get less than a 6-inch perch on a culvert, that's helping the salmon, but that was a full block for the lamprey. Fish ladders, a straight edge on a 90-degree fish ladder that might have been put in to get around a barrier. Lamprey have trouble with that 90-degree angle, and they can latch up and climb, but they can't get around that 90-degree angle, so you have to round it for them to be able to get through. So we, with funding from BLM, took part in a big, called the Basin-wide Lamprey Inventory Monitoring Project. I probably got that close.
Yeah.
Because we don't even know where lamprey are. We have ideas and, you know, stories of where they were and where they've been. But we went out and used eDNA. We went out and took a water sample, filtered it through a filter, sent that off to a lab and could get a positive or negative for lamprey in these streams. We get positive here, we then chase it up that stream and see how far they go. And oh, there's a barrier culvert right here. We got a positive here and a negative here. That helps us get money to replace that culvert then to help those lamprey get
Do
upstream.
they go to the ocean?
They do, Pacific lamprey do.
They think that,
So could it be a seal, could be a big predator to them?
Yes, and that's,
they're a snack. They're high in fat content, so they think that actually the lamprey biomass was greater than the salmon biomass historically. And that could kind of make sense, because that's what all the predators would go for, would probably be the lamprey. And that is a pressure that is now on the salmon population.
and what you said hits on part of the hard part of our job. Is we can do a lot of work on this freshwater side, we can work down in the estuary, but those salmon and lamprey, they're going out into the ocean and we're just saying, we hope you come back. And we have no control over there, and there's been terrible ocean conditions the last 5 years, 10 years, the blob. Super warm water that changes the assemblage of what they're eating out there, they're not as healthy when they come back. So, yeah, we're doing, we do what we can on this side, but half of their lifespan, more than half of their lifespan out in the ocean where we have no control over. So it's just,
Think there's ever gonna be a seal control?
so that's a tough issue. Definitely a tough one that we're not gonna solve tonight, but
Yeah.
historically, there was enough salmon and lamprey and everything for those seals to eat. And because we have these depleted, with all these lack of salmon runs and lack of everything else, now that impact that those seal weren't making an impact 100 years ago, we're having a big impact. So it's a tough one. But
Well, I don't know, just since I spent all my life around here, I remember being a little kid, and my grandmother, she wasn't a big fan of the beach, but she'd go grocery shop and take me to the beach, and she's taking care of me. As a kid, if you seen 2 or 3 seals down there at Walport, you'd seen something. And last time I talked to a biologist, I was taking the boat out here a few years ago, and I was talking to her about it, and she said, well, she knew there was 3,000, maybe more than that. And to me, if you just do the simple math of how much it takes to feed them, they gotta be hurting our fish runs big time. So I talked to her about, well, what are we gonna do to it? And I said, well, I got an idea. Let's go over and talk to the Confederated tribe at Selects and see if the Indians don't wanna reestablish some sort of ancient hunting and killing seal rights. We'll see if we can fund them some money. I'll donate to that.
Well, I know Celeste has been working on restoring the lamprey.
yeah,
I mean, they're heavy into it, so.
yeah, absolutely.
Just out of curiosity, we've got those little brook lampreys, about 4 inches long. Do you know those? Does anybody else have those?
Yeah.
They're coming out about now and they leck and like you can see, I don't know, maybe 15 of them with little yellow ribbons. And they're blind and they spend most of their life cycle in the gravel. They're really interesting. They're
That's
just-
pretty cool.
They're blind and they have their little sucker mouths and they grab the rocks and they move them away and you can see where they're lecking those. So where else do we have them? We've got them in Little Lobster. Brook lamprey,
They're just small versions where Pacific lamprey can be
that long.
huge, they're just little guys.
They live like barnacles in the gravel. It's just they're mostly kind of.
Something else I've been wondering, I had a court pond on my place.
Sorry, could you say again?
I had a weird pond on
Okay.
that place.
Yep.
And it worked really good for, can't even know 5 years, about 40 years ago, that boy kind of showed again. But what I've noticed is it sure makes a huge difference to the fish, that not being there. Can a guy get in there with a machine to clean that back out?
That's a question for the permitting agencies.
So they're not open on Sundays, are they?
Most part, no.
That's what I'm gonna do.
I can't advise for or against that.
Could build a new one on top.
Had a weird pond that was off.
Any other questions?
Has there ever been,
Yes.
any thought, we're covering all these, and I'm guilty of myself with, like fir trees along the banks of the river. But they keep all the sunlight out. They may keep it shady in the summertime, but if you had deciduous trees in there instead of fir trees, they would lose their leaves in the wintertime, and then the sunlight, if we ever get in the wintertime, would be on there, and then these little snails and little things that the fish could feed on would have the sunlight and the plants, and they would have more to eat.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it'd be good to have a diversity of the plants, because the more diversity in plants you have there, the more diversity you'll have in your macroinvertebrates.
Yeah.
And then more food for
But
the
when you
fish.
plant all fir trees, everything is dead underneath them, then nothing grows.
It's true.
Even butter.
I would say you might get more growing if they're spaced out a little bit more, or if the floodplain was activated, so you had more water up on the floodplain. He's the plant, I'm getting over to him because he's the plant.
Well, and a longer timescale too, if you think 50 years out, the kind of canopy will start raising. And you'll start to get some more of those native kind of shade tolerant species growing underneath it. But I've seen it, you know, in 10-foot spacing in reproduction areas, you have almost nothing growing underneath there. I think there's been some studies up on the smaller streams, on cutthroat streams, it actually hurts productivity of the stream when you have so much shading from the trees, that you don't get enough sunlight to have that primary production to be the base of the food chain. So thinning out trees, thinning can be really healthy for a forest. It helps the other trees grow bigger, because if you have so many trees pushed together, they're kind of stunting each other's growth. But our best guess for the historic condition of the Alsea Valley was about a 50-50 hardwood conifer split. So it was never a, monoculture of conifers.
On the hillsides even?
On the hillsides too. So that was, big leaf maple, we get a little ash and oak from the valley up here where we don't get it on the coast. So what we try to do when we do planting is try to mimic, that past condition, also look to the future, and ashes are dying everywhere. There's a lot of pressure on ash. We're not planting as much ash anymore because of that. I think diversity is key. I think that's in planting and in life. Maybe doing a thinning and getting some more hardwoods in there, or just thinning and letting that kind of naturally grow, get a little bit more light might be the solution there.
Isn't it, I read one place that the Doug fir made up only about 20% of the
I think that's probably
hardwood
about
tree,
right.
the conifers
Mhm.
historically.
Are you guys starting to do projects for thinning, that sort of thing?
We do a little bit, so most of our work obviously is focused on streams and kind of riparian areas, but our funding sources do include upland work.
We have about 1,000 acres downriver on the Alsea with the new forest practices.
Yeah.
pushed forward. It's basically a no touch zone, but we got, some of that acreage is 500, we planted 500 trees to an acre all the way to the flood zones in those areas, and they're 20 years old. It's really tight. There's no anything in there won't be. I mean, at least some snags eventually.
Sure.
But yeah, we can't get in there without some sort of special project.
Well, yeah, and so the main funder, OWEB, doesn't do as much of that, but we're a part of what's called the Alsea Stewardship Group, which is a Forest Service funded stewardship fund that essentially income from harvests on forest or shared off forest to benefit the national forest.
Okay.
And Civic Forest Trust is a big landowner out. Well, they own Van Eck Forest, which is about 8,000 acres now. Yeah, they do. They've applied through that funding opportunity for thinning and stank creation and that. So yeah, there are funding sources for that type of work for sure. Any other questions, comments?
Thank you for.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Tony.